Welcome back to my next video. So in this video I'm going to be covering some useful tips and tricks and provide you the guidance on how to use the useEffect hook. So I have a simple React component over here. All of the project setup was done on my previous video, and I have created a docs directory over here. So for the purpose of this video, what we're going to be using is we're going to look into useEffect hook, and we're going to be using this public API, which will just give me the random dog evidences. So based on that, I will be showing you guys how you can fetch the data within useEffect hook and what are the things that you need to consider while using the useEffect hook. Okay, without further ado, let's get started on this one. So before even starting, I have a next terminal over here, which is pointing to the same directory. So I want to install a package called Axios. So what this Axios allows you to do is it will provide you a useful, rather than using you can use a browser's fetch API, but I like to use Axios because it's way simpler, and yeah, I've been using it a lot, so I don't like using fetch. Now, in order to use Axios, what you want to do is you want to import Axios from Axios. Okay, now we have the library to fetch the data. Now we're going to import the useEffect. So before even starting the tutorial on useEffect, let's go to the documentation. And it's pretty much the same thing like how you import useState. You're going to import useEffect from React. So the main purpose of useEffect is to provide, do some side effect action based on the user interactions within your app. You can make a use of useEffect hook whenever the app loads or component mounts, or during, all of the life cycle of the component. So we're going to start by importing the useEffect hook. useEffect. Now, since we imported this, we can make a use of this one. So the way to use it is you will say useEffect, and it's going to take two arguments. One is going to be a callback function, whatever the code you want to run within that block, and the second argument is going to be a dependency array. So if I put a simple console log over here, let's say I want to say use effect, and if I inspect it over here, okay, let's see use effect. As you can see, it only renders, whenever when the component loads for the first time. To simplify a little bit over here, I want to add a h1 tag saying this is from useState tutorial, just to make it better, because we want to create a new component underneath all of these buttons where we're gonna display some data. So what happens if you don't provide dependency array? Because this is really key, whenever you are using useEffect hook. Let's see if I don't provide any dependency array. As you can see, it's doing the same thing, it's rendering twice. So while we're here, let's as I already said, right, even if I provide the empty array over here, it looks like this code is being run twice. As you can see on line 12 on app.js. To fix this, what you want to do is, if you created your app using create React app, you want to go to index.js file and delete the react.strict mode. So that should make sure that useEffect gets triggered only once. Yep, now it's running only once. So now that is fixed, let's test this by removing the dependency array. So we don't have a dependency array, so what it means is it's gonna run every time this component renders. So what are the criteria to consider as rendering? Let's say you change some sort of state at that time that component renders. Let's say if I add counter, as you can see, this useEffect is running, every time I increase or decrease the counter. which is not a good practice because it's gonna like decrease the performance of your app massively. So it's always like you need to consider like what should be the dependency area depending upon your use case. If I don't provide anything, it's gonna run only once. So now if I increase or decrease the counter, as you can see, it's not running. So that's good. Yeah, we're gonna look into like how we can provide anything as a dependency over here on the later part of the video. So let's start by making use of this Axios. So what I want to do is every time my app loads, I want to fetch the data. So the way to do it by using Axios is I want to do Axios dot get, and I want to provide the request URL. In this case, this one right here. Yeah, don't worry about it. I'm going to put this link on the description below so you guys can check this endpoint out. I'm going to use a promise-based syntax over here rather than async await. So what it's doing is Axios, we're telling Axios to go and like make a request to this URL, and once you get the request and if everything is successful, we want to use then block. Within that then block, we can have a callback function. Let's say we can have a response. We can use an arrow syntax over here. And let's just look what we are getting. Console.log response. If I do that, and if I refresh the app, as you can see, we're getting like some sort of data back. We can even like monitor on the network tab. And inside that response object, we have a field called data, and this is what we are interested in. So what I like to do is do response.data. If I do that, you can see like it is an object, and it consists of two things: message and status. So whenever you're using some sort of like dot operator to access the data out of the object, it's always good practice to use question mark over here, which is called optional chaining. That way, if the data is not available on that response object, it's not gonna say like cannot read the property of undefined data, and it will like prevent the app from crashing too. So it's always a good practice. So now we know like how to handle the success part. Now we want to handle the failure part. Let's say if you had some sort of network errors, what you want to do is you want to catch that error. You can do dot catch, and we might have error, and if there is any sort of error, we will just console log it, just like that. Now our Axios portion is almost done, because it's not useful like when we just log it. So we want to store in some sort of state. So we're going to create a simple use state variable. So we want to say const data set data to use state, and it's going to be an object. So if you guys don't know how to use useState, please check out my previous video. I'll add it in the description below as well. So in the previous video we dealt with number, now we're going to be dealing with object. So before even logging it, we want to do set data, and the data that we want to set is going to be response. If there is a response, then grab the data out of it, just like that. Now we should have that data on our state, so we can get rid of this log. And now what we want to do is rather than putting everything over here, let's create a new component over here. I have created a directory called components, because whenever you're creating new components, it's always good practice to keep it inside the components directory. And I have one more directory called docs over there, and I will name it as dog.js. Now I'm going to use a snippet to create a React functional component arrow based, so I would do RAFCE, and if I hit tab, it's going to generate a simple markup component for me. So if you don't know how to do that, you want to go to extensions and search for React, and like install this function ES7 React Redux snippet. And depending upon the scenario, you might have to restart the VS Code, and once you do that, it's going to be all set up and ready for you. So instead of default export, normally I like to use named export. So I will do export default, export dog using named export. And every time I create a new component, what I like to do is I like to create a index.js file just to export this dog component into index.js. So the only thing that we're going to be doing over here is export dog from /dog. Yeah, I'll show you in a minute, like why I'm doing this. Now our dog component is ready. So I want to go to app.js, and over here I want to import that. Import dog from, I'm in app.js directory, so I want to go to components / dogs. So if I didn't add that index.js file, so what it's basically doing is it's going into components directory and it's going to dogs directory, and it's trying to find the index.js file. Since we are exporting that component from index.js, you don't have to do like /dog again. Just to like it makes like code cleaner while you're importing it. That's the reason I use index.js file. Now our component is ready. Now I can simply render it over here. I'm going to dog, it's going to be a self-closing tag, and as you can see, I can see a dog over here. Okay, now our dog setup is ready. Now let's start writing some code on dog. Over here, I want to get rid of this, and I want to do h1, and I will say useEffect tutorial. That way you know like what code goes where. Now, and also what I will do is now, because the whole purpose of this component is to display the dog images, right? Right now we don't have that image because all of our data, like all of the data related to dog lies on this parent component, which is app.js. Now in React, what you can do is you can pass the data from one component to another component using props. So what we can do is we can do something like data equals to the data that we're trying to pass lies on this data, because we set the data over here as soon as we fetch the data. So I can copy that and pass it over here. Now what we have access over here is what it's called props. So I'm going to show you like two different ways to handle this and what I like to do. So you could do something like props. Since we already passed the prop from parent component, we can destructure the props object from that, just like that. And the thing that we're interested within this object is data. We can use data just like that. Now we have the data to display it on the children component. So how do we display it? So let's go to the network tab and look at the response. So as soon as we make a request, we have access to this object right here, which we are setting it in the state variable called data. And within that data, we have a data field called message, and that contains the link to display the images. So now in React, like in order to insert any JavaScript stuff within the HTML, you can use curly braces. And it's always a good practice to check if you have something or not. Let's say if I'm trying to access something out of data, I want to make sure the data exists over there first. So we can do, like conditional rendering. If there is a data, then I want to display a image tag. It's going to be a self-closing tag, and the source of that image is going to be data. As I said already, I like to use optional chaining. Data.message. Make sure I spell it properly. Okay, it's giving me some warnings. Okay, alternate properties. So I can do alt equals to, you can simply do dog. As you can see, I'm seeing the dog image over here. Now, so it doesn't do anything right now. If I refresh the app again, it's gonna show me the new dog. And just to make sure everything is consistent in terms of styling, we're not going to do crazy styling, but just in case, you can just provide a style tag. And it's going to be an object. Inside that I can do width of 500 pixels, height of 500 pixels. So that's going to make everything pretty consistent. Okay, so now our basic setup is all ready, and as you can see, it has an empty dependency. That's why it's only gonna fetch the data when we load the app. Just like that. Okay, now let's start exploring what we could do with this dependency array over here. The main one use case could be, let's say we want to do something. We want to fetch the data not only on whenever the app loads, but also whenever we click some sort of button. So let's create a button called fetch data. Over here, I want to create a button called fetch dogs data. Right now it doesn't do anything at all. You know what, let's create the put this button on top of the image. Okay, now every time we click this button, we want to fetch the data, but the problem is we're not, the fetch docs data button is in docs component, and we're not, like fetching the data over here. Rather, we're fetching the data on the parent component, which is in app.js. So how could we achieve that? I mean, as we looked earlier, the way to interact or share the data between the components, you can do it through props. So maybe we could explore it further and make a use of the props. So we want to have onClick function. Inside this onClick function, we want to do some sort of changes, like let's say handle fetch data. And we're gonna get that data from props. Okay, everything is good. Now if we click the button, it's gonna do anything? Nope, because we don't have this handle fetch data on the parent. Now we can pass an extra prop called handle fetch data. And now over here, what we want to do is we want to link this function somehow with this useEffect hook so that it gets triggered. In order to do that, we're going to create a simple state called data set fetch data. It's going to be a simple Boolean flag. It's going to start with false. It doesn't really matter, what's the current value of this fetch data is, because we're just using it to make sure we trigger this useEffect hook. So we're going to copy that set fetch data. On the earlier tutorial, I showed you, how to add a separate function on the click handlers. Now we're going to use an inline function to do that, because we're doing a simple thing over here. It's going to be a simple inline arrow function. Basically what it does is it's just flipping the switch for that Boolean flag. We're going to do not of data. Okay, so now we have a click handler which like flips that boolean flag, but even though like it's not doing anything, because the reason is we haven't added it as a dependency. So now what we will do is we're going to copy that state and put it over here. Now what you will see is, since we added this as a dependency, this code is going to run whenever the app loads, meaning like whenever you refresh the app, and every time this surface data changes, it's going to make a call to this endpoint. Okay, let's test it out. Okay, looks like it's fetching the data on load. Now if I click fetch dogs data, as you can see, it's fetching new dog images. Yep, looks like everything is working properly. Now we want to extend it a little bit further. Let's say, before even fetching the data, let's say we want to wait for some time. Let's say, for example, of this video, let's do like 3 seconds. We can make a use of a browser set timeout function. Do set timeout. It's going to take 2 arguments. One is going to be the callback function, and one is going to be the interval. So this is the callback function as a first argument, and the second argument is going to be how much time you want to wait before you even run that function. So let's say I want to wait 3 seconds. As you can see, it's 3000 over here because this time is in millisecond. So we want to run the code, some sort of code, after 3 seconds. So that code is going to be this Axios function. We want to take this code and put it right inside there. Okay, now if I refresh the app, as you can see, it's waiting for 3 seconds, and after that it's making the call. And it's the same with if we click fetch data, it's gonna wait for 3 seconds, and then it's gonna make a call. Okay, it looks like everything is fine, but let me show you one use case over here. Let's say if I constantly keep on clicking this fetch data dog. This doesn't look really good, right? Because it just has the flickering effect. It just fetches a bunch of times. So there is definitely something wrong over here. The problem over here is every time you click the button, we are falling into this block, and we are waiting for the timeout, like before even completing this timeout, because we are constantly clicking the button. All of the like set timeouts are on like on top of each other, and which we don't want that behavior. So every time we click the button, what we want to do is we want to clear the timeout from the previous click and then start a new one. In order to achieve this, inside the useEffect, you have a function called return statement. So what it does is you can pass a callback function. Oh, let me show you on the React doc. So this should have somewhere over here. Return statement. useEffect cleanup. Oh, it looks like they don't have it. Let me just show it right here. It's going to have a callback function basically. Inside this, what you would do is you want to provide like all of the cleanup work that you want to do. In this case, we want to clear the timeout because we don't have a variable. Let's do like let timeout equals to set timeout, and we can copy that and paste it over here. So now, if everything is working properly, okay, it's waiting for 3 seconds. Let's keep clicking this. As you can see, it's only fetching the data once now. Like you're not seeing constant data fetching over there. So it's always good to remember this useEffect. Like inside the useEffect, like this return statement. Depending upon your use case, let's say if you're pulling something out of Redux store, or like subscribing to any sort of services, you might want to unsubscribe. So basically what it's doing is, as soon as the component renders, and if we fall into this block, and if something that re-triggers that render, and if you come over here again for the second time, it will clear out the instances of the previous call. In this case, it's timeout. You might have like different use cases depending upon the scenario. Yeah, this is really useful whenever you're dealing with some sort of timeouts, or like intervals, subscriptions. You be always always keep in mind, because this is really helpful. I don't want to wait 3 seconds. Let's make it 1 second. So it waits only 1 second. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Like in this tutorial we learned about like how to deal with props. Okay, you know what, let's do one thing before even ending this tutorial. The other way to like take the props is to destructure them right here, instead of destructuring as a like name. You could do like copy this and put it over here and get rid of this, and it should work just fine. Sorry about that, I accidentally pressed a different button. Now if I do face data, it's going to wait 2 seconds and face the data, so everything is working fine. And also one more good practice is to add a default value of your props, because we know that data is an object. Let's say if any component which is calling this dot component, let's say if they don't provide the data, what we want to have is we want to have a empty object, and we know that handle face data is a function, so we want to do, it's going to be equal to arrow function, and it's going to return nothing. It's always good practice, that way you can handle your errors properly. Okay guys, I think that's pretty much it in terms of this useEffect tutorial. So on my next video, I'm planning on doing a tutorial on useRef hook, which gets tricky sometimes, and which is a really useful hook too. So I will catch you guys on the next video. So if you guys enjoy the content, please give it a like, and please subscribe to the channel. It massively helps me a lot. So I'll be putting this code on GitHub, so if you guys want to check it out, and I'll write it as a description. I will see you guys on the next video. Thank you.